there's going to be plenty of shit that goes wrong during the season.
Sure.
Why not think about things that could go well, too? So this first one, Chuck, what if this team makes the playoffs? A couple different scenarios for this.
I want to see where you're going with this.
Like, obviously, if it's like last year where the East just kind of sucks and they get a wild card, go, okay, cool. They're lucky to get 6 games out of a first round. But I'm going to go, because there's a difference, right? Like just kind of sneaking in because everyone else is bad. Or say you're third in the division. Say it's the Rangers, Hurricanes, and you're not 20 points behind them, just lucky to be in. You're actually a decent enough team.
Right.
Should that change the timeline? Should it change how they attack this season? Like, what if this team makes the playoffs? How would that change your perception of what they have going forward?
So I think for me, I actually went on the, I think it's the Getting Gritty With It podcast.
I saw,
last night. Yeah, and they asked me a question somewhat similar to this, coming at it from a little bit of a different angle, but their question was more about what is the actual timeline? You know, when are they going to make the pivot? And the point I made is that I think their plan is to make the pivot in 2026. I think that has always been their plan. That very much is in line with the original timeline for Mitchkov coming over in 2026 and like, okay, he gets here, we hit the gas pedal, we're going. I think that still holds based on the the contracts, the retentions, some of the things that are coming off the books in 2026. That said, I think there's a scenario where if the Flyers do certain things this season, they could expedite that timeline. They could try to make the pivot next offseason instead. Making the playoffs would be part of that. But for me, it's not even just making the playoffs. It's making the playoffs in a certain way. Because if the Flyers, and I actually said this in our Discord a couple days ago when we were having one of our many conversations about the state of the Philadelphia Flyers, I said that the worst case scenario for me for the Flyers for next season is they are a bubble team and maybe even a playoff team, but they are a bubble team, playoff team that is carried by their depth, where no one takes a major step forward. Matvei Mitchkov scores 40, 45 points, has a perfectly acceptable rookie season, but nothing mind-blowing. And they make the playoffs because the East is weak and because they just wore teams down via their depth. Because to me, that outcome would suck for 2 reasons. Number one, it means they don't get the high pick. But number 2, they still haven't gone anywhere towards solving their main problem, which is how do we get this team from being a mid-pack team to a top-tier team? The flip side of that, though, is if the Flyers make the playoffs because, let's say 2 or 3 guys, and going through the lineup, these are the guys I'm looking at. Let's say Owen Tippett, Joel Farabee, Tyson Forster, Bobby Brink. And then on defense, Cam York, Jamie Drysdale. And I'll even add on in goal, Sam Ersson. 7, they were saying 7 guys I'm thinking of off the top of my head. If 2 or 3 of those guys take the leap from, hey, they're okay, to, oh man, they're like at Travis Konechny levels of impact on the ice on a nightly basis, and Matvei Mitchkov has a really good rookie year. If that happens, where suddenly then you've got a Mitchkov who very much looks like he's on a trajectory, a very quick trajectory to be a star, like a capital S star, really good. This season he goes out, he scores 70 points in 75 games. And you're like, man, that's him as a rookie. Holy shit, this dude's going to be a 100-point guy. Like, and we're like, man, that's happening. And then you have Owen Tippett pops in 45, and Cam York scores 40 with sterling underlying metrics, and Jamie Drysdale replaces Sean Walker, and Joel Farabee looks like the guy from the first 50 games of the year, except all year, and the power play gets better, so he scores 70 points. Then you're thinking to yourself, I can deal with the fact that they didn't get a top 5 or top 10 pick because they might not need that much more help. Suddenly it's like, okay, trade for one more really good center, and we're cooking with gas here. If that's the scenario, then I'm thrilled. Then I'm like, get into the playoffs, freaking rules, and maybe use those 3 first-rounders and 3 second-rounders and the cap space that opens up, and go out there and get the guys you need and hit the gas pedal and let's friggin' go. If that's the case, making the playoffs is awesome, and it expedites this like crazy. If they make the playoffs because the East stinks again and everybody on the team pretty much is just what we expect they're going to be and nothing more, then that's a bummer. And then I'm honestly disappointed with how the season went, even if they get to the first round and lose in 6. I'm still how does this help the future?
It really does depend on, if it's, Ottawa and Buffalo, they're both still lost.
Yeah, they're both still bad.
Jersey, they had a bunch of injuries again. And Washington and Pittsburgh are just exactly what we think they are, mediocre at best.
Or if another one of the teams that we're if
Detroit stinks,
Tampa falls off a cliff, or Boston falls off a cliff, teams that we're expecting to get in, a couple of those pull the jersey and just out of nowhere stink, and the Flyers take advantage because John Tortorella gives this team a high floor because he's just going to make sure they don't make the mistakes that everybody else does. If they sneak into the playoffs like that, I'm like, well, shit, now I don't know where this is going. But if they get into the playoffs because 2 or 3 of their mid-tier guys with plausibly high-end upside take steps and Matvei Michkov has a hell of a rookie year, then it's a big year for the Flyers.
That's I think there's 3 things. 1, Michkov closer to being the guy than you would expect from a 19-year-old.
Right.
Yes, we believe him to be, maybe he should have been the second pick and we got him at 7, but fact remains, he's a 19-year-old coming to a whole new side of the world.
We still need to see it.
Yeah, we need to see him do this in the NHL, but maybe he's just that sort of prodigy where he comes in and boom, it's all good. And like you said, 70 points. Dope. At least one of Frost or Couturier seriously beats last year's production.
Yeah.
Because then that would mean, is either one of them a 1C? No. But we talked about last week with what if Frost has 70 points? Well, 2C's taken care of. Because in my mind right now, they need 2 centers.
Yeah.
But if it's only 1, that seems a whole lot easier. And then maybe Jet Luchenko is that guy. Maybe
in
it
the
isn't.
future.
In
the future.
That's still years away.
But if you are suddenly, if this time next year we're looking at a Flyers team that has we're looking at Morgan Frost as 2CA and then Sean Couturier as 2CB.
Exactly.
Where Frost does the offense and Couturier does the defense while also scoring you 55, 60 points. Then you're none of those guys is a first line center, but you get that guy and then suddenly the center depth looks great.
Yeah. Third thing, and this is probably the one that we know the least about, and as we say all the time, has the most outsized impact.
Goaltending.
If Ersson or Fedotov is absolutely really good.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying Sorokin, that sort of good. I'm just saying 9-13, 50 starts for Ersson, and he doesn't have those. He doesn't have an abundance of, he let 3 goals in the first 5 shots. If he doesn't have an abundance of those and just finds the consistency he had prior to having to play 28 out of 30 or whatever the hell it was, if those things fall into place, because I expect the wingers to be pretty good.
I do too.
I think we're going to get to your Farabee article tomorrow, but even him, all right, I'm putting him down for 20, and if it's 30, well, okay, great.
Right.
Right. And we're going to get, I'm expecting basically all 3 sets of wingers to be pretty good. How good? We'll see if they take big steps or if it's just kind of continuing what they did. But last year they were all pretty good for the most part. That's my what if for what if this team makes the playoffs? It depends on how they do it.
I think that's the baby. It depends on how.
Yeah, if it happens the way where it's real, because there's you can make the fucking Washington made the playoffs last year. They stunk.
Yeah, everybody
they were
knew
a bad team, and everyone knew it.
Yeah.
They knew it.
They knew it. They traded people at the deadline.
They sold at the deadline.
The Flyers traded 1 guy. The Caps traded 4.
Yeah,
they traded Kuznetsov.
Yeah.
Now I know he wasn't playing when they traded him, but they could have taken him back.
If you have the Islanders, Pat, and listen, in the years leading up to last year, Islanders had decent little run, but they had 16 or 19 overtime losses. If it's fake, that's a whole different story. But if they are closer to first in the division than 4th, and they're in that mix in the top 3, then you start to change the timeline a little, and then it is, okay, well, what do we actually need? Because it looks like we've checked a lot of boxes.
Yeah, exactly.
And that would be good.
I think that is something that, and I wouldn't consider myself to be an optimist, but I do think that the pessimists rule that possibility out too quickly. That, yes, you look at this roster right now and you say it doesn't have enough talent.
Doesn't.
But if 2 or 3 of the guys on the roster take big steps, suddenly, yeah, they still probably need a little bit more talent, but they don't need as much as it seems like they need right now.
We all silly like the mayor.